Howdy, and welcome again to this, I believe, the fifth. Would that be right, producer?
We are on number 5.
This is the 5th installment of the Clay and Woodrow Show. That you heard on microphone is our producer, Don Knotts. That's Knotts. That's DonnieBoyKnotts@gmail.com if you have any comments or concerns to send over to our producer, Don Knotts. So, but howdy, welcome. We thank you for tuning in. You know, our last installment, the 4th installment, I think we call them episodes, but either way, is we had over 1,300 views. I think I said that last week, and we actually did not have over 1,300 views. Where are we at now? Is that about right?
1,300, yeah.
Over 1,300 views, so we thank you for that. And I thank my mom for watching it 900 times, and the other 400 of you people that watch, we appreciate that.
Has anybody checked on her? Because she literally couldn't have done anything else.
Yeah, and I think she just keeps clicking on it, But we appreciate my mom's support of the Clay and Woodrow Show. As you can see as well, we've added something where technology just at its finest here at the Clay and Woodrow Show. But we have a Woodrow cam, and you can see everything that Woodrow is doing behind the scenes at this time. As always, he is as active as ever, and so we're glad that Woodrow is in the studio with us. And let me be more clear. This is the Omar T. Oliver studio here, and we're just so tickled to have the naming rights, Omar Oliver, attributed to anything that deals with the Clay and Woodrow Show. We're going to deal with a lot today. Peek at the Georgia-Missouri game, look forward to the Georgia-Auburn game, talk about what happened with the showdown with the LSU-Alabama game, which, by the way, Sean and I both got wrong. I feel better. Misery loves company. Sean picked Alabama. I picked Alabama. But the Ed Orgerons of LSU came out victorious. We're going to do a little flashback of days gone by, some Waycross nostalgia that the producer and I, Don Knotts, are going to kind of walk through as well. But we also have a giveaway today, and every good vlog. Is this what this is? A vlog?
That is correct.
Technically, this is a vlog. I kept calling it a podcast, and my college friends would say, Clay, you realize what you're doing is not a podcast because you're not able to get it through a podcast site or whatever. And we might go to that. But if anything, they argue that I have a face for radio, and the podcast would probably be more appropriate, but you're live in studio with us here today. But let's take a second and just look through some things. I want to make sure that I remember our fine sponsor today. And Don Knotts, this way for our sponsor. Let's go this way. Absolutely.
There you go.
Over here is going to be our sponsor, and one of our big time platinum sponsor, I think we call it a platinum sponsor, is Unitent Refrigeration over in Swanee, Georgia, handling all of your large-scale refrigeration needs. What I know them as is the trusted leader in industrial refrigeration. I know that's how you know them as well. And if any of you guys out there today are having any needs when it comes to bakeries, chemical manufacturing facilities, food processing plants, or poultry processing facilities, just give Unitemp Refrigeration a call. And so if you got any large-scale refrigeration Freon ammonia needs, please call Unitemp Refrigeration. Mr. Producer, my brother works there, and so some of his folks there at work kind of follow the Clay and Woodrow Show. The other day, someone asked me, what did my brother do for a living? And I said, he is a refrigerant engineer. And they said, what do you think the common question would be after that when I say he's a refrigerant engineer? What was their next question?
What's that?
Exactly. That was the next question. What in the world is refrigerant? And so I gave him one of these. I have no idea what a refrigerant engineer does. But thank you once again for your platinum sponsorship that you are not aware of. But thank you for your sponsorship. And before we get too much further, last week we had as our sponsor, Riverbend Renovations. I'm part owner of that company, so why I struggle to remember the name, I'm not certain of. But Riverbend Renovations today has been grateful enough that we have a gift, and the gift is, let's see, right behind my shoulder. So today, we have this, Mr. Producer, are we able to get this fine piece of equipment here on camera?
Yeah, we've got it. It looks good.
This is a gravity feeder. For those of you that aren't rednecks, you'll have no idea what this is, but this is something that you put corn in, you strap it to a tree, and then deer, sometimes turkey, other animals, I seem on my camera that it just attracts a bunch of raccoons near my deer stand, but this retails for $499. But today we're going to give it away. And by retail for $499, what I really mean by that is we have about $12 worth of PVC into this and some spray paint. But we're going to give away a gravity feeder. Now, often used as a stocking stuffer. It can be used for many different things, but this gravity feeder. So here's what you have to do to win this gravity feeder. It does not come with a bag of corn because the bag of corn costs more than we actually have in the feeder. But what you need to do is, I think what I hear people say is to like, comment, and share. Now, I'll be honest with you. If you just do one of those three things, I'll be tickled to death and I'll probably throw you into the thing. But if you could share it with someone, that would mean a lot. And we're going to put you in the kind of lineup here to win the gravity feeder. And thank you to Michael D'Ambrosio for building this fine contraption. On to Georgia football, and settle down, Woody. Thank you, sir. On to Georgia football. Georgia-Missouri game, I think for all purposes, for me, was about what I expected. People disappointed with the offensive productivity. I get that. I'm okay with that. The offense could be a little sluggish. The offense was running pretty well, but we weren't able to do many things in the red zone. So Rodrigo Goggles comes out and saves the day for us. The defense looked fantastic. A lot of players that are coming of age. I definitely think Nakobe Dean is coming of age, and he is a fun one to watch. And so to watch all the 5 stars running all over the defense was exciting. I wasn't bothered by the Georgia-Missouri game. The way they're designed, their style of football is hopefully low-scoring football games where their defense is really – it's kind of like what old Alabama football used to be. Looking forward as well, Georgia comes in, is going to play Auburn this weekend. Now, that one to me is really interesting. I think Kevin Steele's probably one of the better defensive coordinators in the country. Their defensive line – I think our defense is better. Their defensive line is probably as good as any you'll see in the country. So in some ways that – is a tough answer for our offensive line, and just running the ball against their defensive line is going to be difficult. And then we know that we've got our problems with our receivers, just finding separation and those kind of things. So I think this Auburn game is going to be a close one. You know, the bookies in Vegas say that Auburn gets 3 points because of the home field advantage, and I understand the rationale behind that. But I think this is a very low-scoring game. I see it as like a 17-14 where UGA pulls away with a win that we'll all be excited to have against a very worthy opponent. And so I see Georgia winning that game. We flash back a little bit and look at the Alabama-LSU game. I think that game went about what everyone expected, other than I think the miscues in the first quarter for Alabama kind of got them working at such a deficit that they were trying to play catch up, but they were never out of that ball game. That's what's pretty impressive about Alabama football, is that they're never out. And certainly Georgia has experienced that, unfortunately. For many seasons, that we seem to be comfortably ahead, and the next thing you know, we've lost a ball game in the final minutes. So, looking ahead at what we have at the week ahead, I think that we will see Georgia, pull out ahead. I'm playing through all the scenarios in my mind of kind of what it looks like. Moving forward, what's it going to ultimately end up with as far as a Final Four. And if you ask me today what I thought the Final Four, now today, I mean, obviously all of this could change, but I see LSU going in as number 1, Ohio State going in as number 2, Clemson going in as number 3, and Alabama going back in as number 4. Alabama does have a problem going in as a 1-loss Alabama and a non-conference championship winning Alabama. It's not either of those two issues. It's the fact that their strength of schedule this year happens to be particularly weak, and they don't have a signature game to fall back on where they've beat a quality opponent. I just don't think the football gods allow any other 1-loss team in other than Alabama. So that's my Final Four as of right now. And within that, I see Ohio State today being national champions. If you were to ask me today, but time will see and time will tell, and we'll see a little bit more about that. And then what I want to do today, Mr. Producer, is I also wanted to do what I do. It might be a weekly installment. I think it's going to be necessary. Is Clemson education, the Clemson fans, who, by the way, I love. Dabo Swinney's probably my favorite head coach in football right now, but they just seem to misunderstand what the issue is. Clemson fans will refer to, well, and last year we took care of business very well, and we took care of Notre Dame, and we took care of Alabama, and they did, and I don't. No one takes that away from them. What we would try to argue, though, is yes, but you do have a huge advantage. You have an easier path to the playoffs. And they're like, well, no, I don't know that that's particularly true, because I don't know if you saw it. Did you see how well we played Alabama last year? And I said, that's not what anyone's arguing. In order to win in the playoffs, you must first get to the playoffs. And they have an easier path to the playoffs. And that just seems to be mind-boggling for them. And so what I always like to do with my Clemson fans is just say, would you tell me your 4 toughest opponents this year, your 4 toughest opponents? So I actually polled a Clemson fan of mine, and he says our 4 toughest opponents will be, Texas A&M, Wake Forest, Syracuse, and FSU. Those were his 4 toughest opponents that he had to face. And then I reminded him that he was wrong, because he would have to play in a conference championship game, probably against Virginia. And I think Virginia's better than Syracuse or FSU. But I guess what I'm getting at is, at the end of the day, if you're naming your 4 toughest opponents, if Syracuse, FSU, and Virginia are in the talking points of your 4 toughest opponents, you have to come to a realization you have an easier path to the playoffs. Not questioning how good you can be once you get into the playoffs, but in order to win in the playoffs, you've got to get to the playoffs. So then I just pulled up Georgia's schedule, and I said, I think I could do this without looking, but what are Georgia's 4 toughest opponents, just because that's who I'm most familiar with. And Georgia's 4 toughest opponents this year, it's not going to be Wake Forest, Syracuse, and FSU. It's going to be LSU, Florida, Notre Dame, and Auburn. And that certainly has a different ring to it. I'm not stating today that Georgia is a better football program than Clemson. I'm simply saying that Clemson has a simple path to the playoffs. And by the way, not just this year, but it seems like for several years, even coming into the future, they have an easier path. And so when Clemson played Alabama last, I pulled for Clemson. I'm a Clemson fan, but I'm also a realist. For example, I'm a Georgia fan, and I will tell you the South Carolina loss was embarrassing. It was a bad loss. It's going to really hurt against our resume, not just that we lost to South Carolina, but also the way in which South Carolina has subsequently lost to other teams is also going to be a hurt to the University of Georgia. I try to be a realist about what things are, but I do have some Clemson fans they'll have a realistic conversation. I'm appreciative of those people, like old Carol Horlong. He's a good fella, but others just will always bring up what they did last year in the national championship. Like, I'm not trying to take that away from you, but you do have to realize your path moving into it is much more simple. I want to move now kind of into, and once again, these things are going to work themselves out, but the top 10 that I have moving forward into this week, and I'll start at number 10. I'm throwing in Utah there. I want to convince you that I've seen a bunch of Utah football this year, but guess what? I haven't, nor do I intend on watching a bunch of Utah football. But I have them at number 10. At number 9, I have Oklahoma. Not only did they have the bad loss against Kansas State, they just barely escaped a victory, last week. Number 8, I have Baylor, and people are going to say that that's an unfair pick. I can just tell you, Baylor has a great record. They have a great story, but they're not a quality football team. If they played quality opponents, you would see them be embarrassed. But I'm still excited for Baylor. I love what's going on there. At number 7, and I do believe my hydrangeas are going to be in. So I'm telling you right now, if my hydrangeas go dead, it's going to be because I've made the Alabama fans. But I have number 7. I have Alabama. Only because I think Alabama's a quality football team. The only thing is they have only faced one quality opponent, and in that showdown they lost. Now they played an interesting game, a fun game, but the only resume prover that you have to show us you've lost in that game. So I have Oregon at number 6. I have Clemson at number 5. Clemson, doesn't matter where we put Clemson, they're ultimately going to work their way into the playoffs. But they just have zero resume to show. And by the way, that once again, Clemson fans, that doesn't mean you're not a good football team. It just, you have to have a resume. And, so far, the top 4 teams, that's working at IBM. And so far you've said, well, I had a summer job at Chick-fil-A, but I'd like to work for IBM. You don't have a resume, but you keep working at Chick-fil-A and a spot's eventually going to open up for you. Number 4, I've got at UGA. I mean, at the end of the day, they've still got a really tough road ahead of them, going to Auburn, got to play Texas A&M, ultimately going to have to face LSU. I don't see them making it through that gauntlet. I mean, I certainly hope they do. Number 3, I have Minnesota. Unlike Baylor, they have a resume and they have a quality win. They beat Penn State, so I have Minnesota at number 3. Once again, I don't see them being there in the final days, but their story is neat thus far. Number 2, I have what I think to be the best team in the country. I have Ohio State, and you'd say, well, Clay, then why don't you put them at number 1? Well, because of their resume. LSU has the better resume, so I have them at number 1, and certainly impressed and continue to be impressed what LSU's program does. I don't know if you saw, Mr. Producer, but it is not unusual for post-game celebrations to occur in which the coach, gets up and says some things. And I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but occasionally he will use some 4-letter explicatives in his post-game celebration with his players. For whatever reason, an LSU player decided to record this and then post it onto whatever. My technology level is very limited. Chapsnat, whatever they call it, Instagram, whatever it was. But he posted it, and having Ed Orgeron with a bunch of explicatives and saying where exactly Alabama could go, and so that has kind of blown back in the face of LSU. But you've got to have a better locker room policy than having cell phones out when your coach is giving a speech post LSU Alabama game. And so that's kind of my top 10. And but I think we still got a lot of football to go. But I think LSU and Ohio State are the 2 class acts of this year, and we'll see which one of those actually rule the day. I think it's Ohio State, but what do I know? I have no idea, whatsoever. As we were coming in and talking some today there, Mr. Producer, I was asking you, because of where the Omar Oliver studios are, I was asking you, do you remember when Harvey's right here on Plant Avenue? I said, do you remember when that used to be the tobacco warehouse? And just a big silver building. They used to even stop traffic with a conveyor belt when they were loading tobacco. And now, if I remember, and by the way, that possibly is the worst transition in the history of all, whatever this is, radio, vlogging, just to jump in my top 10 list and then start talking about a tobacco warehouse. Note to self, work on transitions. But you said you don't have a recollection of that, and you and I are the same age.
Not the tobacco warehouse.
Okay.
Of course, I started working there when it was Piggly Wiggly.
The Hoggly Woggly?
Hoggly Woggly.
All right. So you don't. All right. So let me give you a little quiz questions. Okay. The original Pick and Save, not to be confused with Pick and Save Part 2. The original Pick and Save. Do you remember the restaurant to the right of it when you first walked into Pick and Save?
Oh man, that I remember. In my family, that is a legendary story of seafood buffets there on Friday night.
Can I pick on you for a little bit?
Go.
My family must be a little bit more bougie than you, because I think my family was of the opinion, the place where people shop barefooted may not be the same place where you want to have your all-you-can-eat seafood buffet. I was never allowed. Now, I was allowed. They had an icy machine. And as you can tell, I've not missed many ices but my mom would never let me eat in there. I think she always found it to be like unscrupulous, unsavory type things going on in the Pick and Save all-you-can-eat buffet. Is that snobbish of my family?
Probably a little bit. But, I had that same thought. Now, thinking back, that probably wasn't the best place to eat on a Friday night.
When you get a bucket of shrimp, that it's like, where do you want to eat tonight? Pick and Save. All right, how about this? Let's go back to the Wayback Machine. Kmart. You remember Kmart?
Kmart, yes.
Now, here's the curveball. Do you remember Scotty's?
I do remember Scotty's.
Yeah, the orange bearded man.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, I think, where Eagle Pone is now. It was almost, I think, a lumber, like a hardware store, Scotty's.
And then that eventually became Choo Choo.
Choo Choo Do It Center. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Quite the recollection.
Yeah.
The Choo Choo Do It Center. And I think that there was a Choo Choo Do It Center too, right by Phipps Plaza in Atlanta. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Okay, so let's go back to the Wayback Machine for just a second. So I'm going to name a scenario, and you tell me if you remember this. Waycross, Georgia used to have a bookstore inside of the mall. And if you walked through there looking for books, somebody would follow you like a hawk, like you were definitely going to steal something. What's the name of that bookstore?
Oh man, I want.
And they were great people. They're nice people.
And I want to say Ballantyne's. I know
It's not
Ballantyne's.
that, but you're in the ball. It's I think it was Bennett Brothers.
Bennett Brothers.
Bennett Brothers.
That's right.
And
that's right.
I would go in there. And first of all, as you can tell from my articulation, not read a lot of books, but you would go into the bookstore. My brother was a big book reader, kind of a Hardy Boys kind of nerd back in the day. But we would go in there, and so my go-to gift every year for Banks was to go get a Joe and Frank Hardy Boys book, and I would go in there, and short of being frisked, they had some tight security back in those days, as if I was going to stick a Hardy Boys book up my shirt and walk out of it, with there. But all right, so we're going back to the Wayback Machine one more time for Waycross, and just see if any of this rings a bell. Any haunted house, JC's haunted house locations, plural, but you're going to need to name 3 of where you can remember a JC's haunted house being.
So definitely the rec department.
Rec department back on like Grove Street.
On Grove Street.
Correct.
Man, just like my parents and your parents wouldn't let you eat at Pick and Save.
Yeah.
They wouldn't ever let me go to the JC's haunted house.
Yeah.
So I remember the rec department, but that's only because people told me.
That's right. Okay, the rec department. Let me help you out some. The Tobacco Warehouse.
The Tobacco Warehouse.
Right here on Plant Avenue, the corner of Plant and Riverside. The other haunted house that I can remember was the old Waycross High School, which is now Central Baptist Church.
Ava Street.
And then the one that and then above Henry and Boykin Clark's office, we had it there for 2 years. And then we moved it over to, and I think the best location, and of course it's now the Circle K headquarters, but is the Phoenix building or whatever that
Phoenix
is.
Hotel.
Phoenix Hotel. Yeah. So those were the locations that I can remember. So if you remember other JC's haunted house locations, if you could just comment below. And I'm sure there's other ones. And I mean, it was back when my dad was in the JC's that they had it, but those are the locations that I can definitely, at least that I can remember. I think that's it. But anyhow, just comment down below. And then when I came in as well, I shared a good Woodrow story. So I don't know if you know this, but Woodrow is not. I won't call him a protective dog because he's too laid back. He's too sweet. But we do spend a lot of time together. It is quite the understatement, though, to say that he is very attached. And so he's with me all the time, and he is not a big fan of other dogs being anywhere near me. And I found this out the hard way. I took him on vacation up to the mountains with me, and while my family was inside eating, I was just standing outside of a restaurant, and a man came up and said, he saw me with a dog and said, how was he trained and all this kind of, and we were just having a conversation, but the man set his dog down at my feet, and Woody did not like that, and so we might have to make sure that this is a PG version, but Woody turned his backside to the pup, and let's use the word, are we okay with tinkled?
Tinkle's good.
Tinkled. And Woody tinkled on the dog to let him know, hey, please stay away from my owner. So he is potty trained. He does not make accidents inside of a house. So fast forward to this weekend, I was over at a coworker's house, and she lives in a nice home with hardwood floors and everything. And so I had Woody inside with me, and you might say, well, Clay, did you bring your dog over to your coworker's house? And the answer simply is yes. Yes, I did. And I think that's frowned upon, but I did. And they invited Woody to come inside. And so Woody was faithfully sitting right beside me. But my coworker gets this great idea and says, well, I've got a dog back that I keep back kind of in the bedroom. It's a little, I don't know what it is, a Maltese, a Pekingese, all those things. They're
below your knees.
You're below my knees. I call them yap or ankle biters, and I'm sure they have a purpose on planet Earth, but I'm not still certain of what that is. But anyhow, so she comes and brings this Maltese, and I'm just like, I don't know that this is a good idea. And I'm trying to articulate why this may not be the best idea, because they only see the kind of the well-trained Woody, that doesn't cause problems. And so she sets this Maltese in my lap. And Mr. Producer, do we have the picture up yet? So this is the final outcome. This picture is the final outcome of what happened when she sat the Maltese Pekingese in my lap. Woodrow and tinkled, I don't think we can use here because that's a lot more than a tinkle.
That's way over a tinkle.
That's way over a tinkle threshold. That's a flooding threshold. But Woody let it be known that he was not tickled that I was holding another dog. So those are my jeans, and those are my wet socks, and those are her wet floors, and those are my wet shoes, in which I had to borrow shorts at a Georgia-Missouri game and go rinse my pants out because Woodrow let the world know that no other dog would be in contact with his dad. So that's my story for the week. And so so I'm asking the producer, I'm just like, this is almost kind of gross. I said, do we share this with the audience? And he's just like, Clay, your co-host took a leak on you. I'm almost certain that it's mandatory that you share that with your audience. So that is your picture of the week where Woodrow did take a leak on his owner. So before we go, I have, of course, always fraudulently given out signings for Woodrow. I think World High Five we gave out, which has been closed for 20 years.
And Valentine's.
Valentine's been closed probably 15 years. But we actually do have a Woodrow, a real event, but because I'm always making up stuff, you're probably not going to believe this either. But as some of you might know, I'm interim pastor at First Baptist Blackshear. And that may not be a good transition either, Mr. Producer, after I've just given a story about my dog tinkling down my leg that I'm now introducing to the world that I am interim pastor at First Baptist. My First Baptist Blackshear friends, I apologize for the timing of this, but I do want to invite you. Woodrow and I will be there the evening of January the 5th. Back in the back of their campus, they have what's called a MAC building, which is kind of a family worship area. It's a multi-purpose room back there. But that evening, for that Sunday evening service at 6 o'clock in the MAC building on January the 5th, we're going to be doing a session back there called Raising Dogs and Raising Kids, where I'm going to be talking about some good biblical principles for parenting that we kind of could learn or steal from how we raise and train our dogs. And so, if we raised and trained, I said this in church the other night, and some of the ladies just like, oh, I don't know. And then I think they got it. But there's things that we do with the dog. And one of my favorite ones is with dogs, you never repeat a command. So if you say sit and they don't sit, you go over there and make them sit. But of course, with our kids, we do crazy things like saying, I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds, that kind of thing. And so we're going to talk about some of the principles that we do in training dogs. If we do some of those same principles with training kids, our kids would benefit from it. But it's a fun evening, January 5th, 6 o'clock, First Baptist Blackshear. You can certainly be there for that. Just to have a little bit of fun that evening, but just talk about biblically based parenting.
Will there be other animals there?
There will not be other animals. So if there was, like, you remember back in the SeaWorld days, you'd have a splash zone. The first 3, like, you don't want to sit here. You're going to be in the splash zone. So there will be no other animals in sight. But that's a very good question.
Well, I think you could work in the story of Noah in that. If there's going to be other animals.
That is correct. So either we'll have a splash zone where ponchos are given out, or there would be no other animals. I think we're going to vote for no other animals. Well, that's it for us today. Georgia's going to win by 3 against Auburn. What else do you need to know? Clemson fans are now enlightened, and they feel better about themselves because I've enlightened them a little bit about their position in college football. And I'm better than you because my family would not eat at Pick and Save buffets. Is that kind of the consensus of today's?
Well, yeah. And just for the record, that was my wife's family.
Oh, that's worse. That's much worse.
Yes.
So yes. I take that. I can't say who your wife is because, of course, you're off. Mrs. Knotts.
That's correct.
Mrs. Knotts. I do apologize because I thought it was a fine restaurant to go and eat at. And I mean, if for some reason that somebody wants to pick up some auto parts and a beach ball and a styrofoam cooler and at the same time eat their fried shrimp, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine. So I apologize for that. Why'd you tell me at the end that it was your wife and not you? That's unfair.
I just couldn't let the Knotts family be thrown under the bus.
Okay. But by the way, I'm a lover of all buffets. as you can tell. I'm trying to back out of this as delicately as I can. Y'all have a good day. See you next week. Think Sean might be back with us next week, but you guys have a great one. Thanks for tuning in.